special broadcast working on WION Co-production with me, Alison LaGrange. Let's take a look at your first story. The US has slapped additional sanctions on Myanmar following a military coup on the 1st of February. The crisis has emerged as an early test of President Joe Biden's foreign policy as his administration pledges to defend democracy and seeks to counter China's rising influence in the region. Now, White House correspondent Patsy Widakwaskwara has this report.
Protests continue in Myanmar following the February 1st military coup. On Wednesday, President Joe Biden announced he is imposing new sanctions on the country's military leaders, their business interests, and family members. Those are on top of sanctions already applied starting in 2017 for atrocities against Myanmar's Rohingya minority.
We will identify at first round of targets this week, and we're also going to impose strong exports controls. We're freezing U.S. assets that benefit the Burmese government while maintaining our support for health care, civil society groups, and other areas that benefit the people of Burma directly.
With few economic ties and sanctions already in place, U.S. leverage on Myanmar is limited. But sanctions targeting the junta matched by U.S. allies can be effective, according to analysts.
Maybe in cooperation with other parties, the Japanese, for instance, who are major players in the economy, the U.S. can help shift the cost-benefit analysis a little bit and incentivize compromise and a return to democracy. But if we think that we're going to slap sanctions and Min Aung Hlaing is going to say, I'm sorry, we are mistaken.
Washington is working with regional allies, including Japan, India, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, who have signaled their support for U.S. outreach to Myanmar.
Continue engagement, prevention of isolation of Myanmar, and to have U.S. play a constructive role in trying to reach this broad consensus.
The Myanmar coup followed accusations of democratic backsliding in the region, including in Brunei, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and the Philippines. Addressing them in the context of strategic competition with China is seen as a challenge for the administration.
How do we compromise and play the long game and keep channels open, even with regimes that we object to? How can we do that and back off of an absolute declaration of principles in order to compete with China while still claiming that the grounds of our competition with China is in some way ideological?
The U.S. has been criticized as hypocritical for sanctioning countries after a violent siege of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump, who falsely claimed the U.S. presidential election was stolen. The same pretext the Myanmar military used for the coup.
I don't think it was ever all that effective when U.S. officials went into Southeast Asian states preaching, but now they'll just be laughed at.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says there is bipartisan support for Myanmar sanctions, but acknowledged America has work to do at home as well.
Pulling our country together, revitalizing our own democratic foundation, building more unity, as President Biden has talked about, that will be an important part of us operating effectively in the world.
Analysts say some allies may question U.S. resolve in the region, given Washington's foreign policy shifts with each new administration. Patsy Widakwaskwara, VOA News.
And to speak about this further, we speak with Voice of America broadcaster Ira Melman, who is in Washington. Ira, it's great that you're with us. Let's jump right in. Does the United States have any particular targets as President Joe Biden rolls out his actions being taken against the Myanmar military?
If you put everything together, Alison, what you come up with, at least in my mind, is economics. And Myanmar, being one of the poorest countries in the world, could be susceptible to such sanctions. However, if you look closely as to how they are being applied, it involves striking out in many members of the military. As we understand it, there is a, shall we call it, a subterranean economy in Myanmar where many members of the Myanmar military are dealing in businesses that are somewhat underground. We are told anyway, and reports say they mostly deal with jade and narcotics. And that is trying to, and many of these military people, as we understand it as well, have been storing this money in the United States. So one of the weapons that the United States is using as far as sanctions are concerned is blocking members of the military from accessing the money they have stored in the United States in banks in the U.S. and other investments.
Right, Ira, what about the questions being asked about the standing of the United States in the world? What kind of effect might that have on Washington's ability to be a major influence on troubled spots such as Myanmar?
I think it's really important, and a lot of this has to do with what's happened over the last 4 years here in the United States. Now, I'm not going to go one side or the other on this in my position as a journalist. However, many experts around the world are saying that, that under Donald Trump and his policies of somewhat isolationism, what he has done is to divorce the United States from its allies. And I think that's been echoed over and over and over again. Now, if that happens, and a lot of people say it has, the U.S. is not in a position overall to be the moral leader in the world by what has happened in the United States over the past 4 years or so. So you will see in the new president, Joe Biden's comments, that he is trying to say, you know, we are going to put these sanctions on some of these military people, but we are also continuing our aid to the people of Myanmar. And that has resulted in somewhat of a step back as far as the military is concerned, as far as these protests are concerned, by kind of stepping back and saying that, well, we, the military, are going to make sure that people who continue to go to work, while many of them are not because they're protesting, that they are okay and they will continue being paid. And as long as they go to work, that's what will happen. And they've also been laying a lot of the violence that first showed up earlier in the week against the protesters. But as far as the question is concerned, does the last 4 years have an effect on what's happening now? The answer is yes, absolutely.
Right. Ira, stay with us while we move on to our next report. We'll take a look at the United States House impeachment managers on Thursday closed their case, arguing former President Donald Trump was directly responsible for the attempt to overturn the counting of Electoral College votes for Joe Biden. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson gives us this report on the Democrats' final argument in this historic trial.
The case against former President Donald Trump inciting the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol now concluded. We were invited by the President of the United States! As House impeachment managers complete their opening argument to the senators who will decide Trump's fate.
Let us show the world that January 6th was not America.
The insurrectionists made clear to law enforcement that they were just following President Trump's orders. They didn't shy away from their crimes because they thought they were following orders from the commander-in-chief, and so they would not be punished. They were wrong.
The intense new video revealed Wednesday, showing the nation's lawmakers fleeing from rioters, followed up Thursday by managers arguing that if Trump is not barred from running for office, he will incite his supporters again.
I'm not afraid of Donald Trump running again in 4 years. I'm afraid he's going to run again and lose, because he can do this again.
Over 2 days, Democrats argued Trump encouraged violence for years, and because of his refusal to say he lost the 2020 election, the nation's capital is still under guard.
He does not say the one sentence that would stop future political violence. The election was not stolen. He still hasn't said that sentence. That is why National Guard troops in full body armor still patrol outside.
The odds of 17 Republican senators joining their Democratic colleagues to find Trump guilty is still unlikely. In a final plea, Raskin asked Republicans to consider the consequences.
President Trump declared his conduct totally appropriate. So, if he gets back into office and it happens again, we'll have no one to blame but ourselves.
Trump's defense will have their turn Friday. They are expected to argue the former president's actions do not meet the legal bar for inciting a riot. A final vote on Trump's case could come as early as this weekend. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Now we come back to you, Ira Melvin, to dig deeper on the impeachment trial of former US President Trump. What kind of defense is being used against finding Donald Trump guilty of impeachment? And what is his team of lawyers displaying?
Well, we can't really tell you that because they haven't said that much. As in their opening statements, so we're talking about Donald Trump's attorneys now, they really didn't do a good job, according to just about everyone who you can talk to. Bruce Castor, one of the attorneys, just kind of went all over the place. He was seeing how people vote in Nebraska, and when asked why aren't they lashing out at the charges made against the former president, he just said, well, you know, the prosecutors made a really good choice, and they really did a good job. And so he said he wanted to lighten the mood. His other attorney so far was far stronger as far as his criticism of the charge leveled against Donald Trump. However, we understand now from reports and people who talked to these lawyers yesterday that when they present their case, and that's going to happen a few hours from now in the Capitol building, that they will only need 1 day to do anything, and then they'll be done. And that brings up all kinds of questions as what they're going to say. At first, Donald Trump, watching from Florida, where he is now living and where he is now residing, at Mar-a-Lago, said he was, or at least told confidants, that he was not happy at all with the way his lawyers presented the case in the beginning. However, he said it was basically okay because he knows he's going to win anyway. He is not going to be convicted. And that, as you heard Catherine just say in her report, is because a 2/3 vote is needed to convict. And that is not going to happen unless a whole bunch of Republicans come over to the Democratic side. And nobody thinks that really is going to happen, so we shall see what happens after maybe 1 day of questioning and 1 day of explaining what the Trump side has to say.
Right. Now, what might be the lasting effects on the United States in light of the storming of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the future of the U.S. Republican Party?
Allison, and that is, what was your reaction and your employer's reaction to what happened on January 6th when the Capitol building in Washington was stormed? Had you ever seen anything like that? Had you ever thought that this could happen in Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely not.
And basically your answer. Is there trust in the United States, as we said in the last story as well, as far as Myanmar is concerned? But the United States really has suffered a setback over the last 4 years or so as far as confidence in what it can do. So you will also see that the United States is trying very hard to gain back that confidence with Joe Biden's staff calling all over the world. They are calling to the European Union. They are calling to ASEAN. But they are making calls. I think we just have to see what happens. It's a long road, and to gain confidence back after the last 4 years, but we don't know what's going to happen, and it's all a question. It's difficult to comment on. We don't know what's going to happen in the future.
All right. Ira, thanks very much for being with us and for bringing us that report and that full analysis there. WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.